Okay, it's time. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is June 29th, and this is a special meeting of the Board of Supervisors. We do have a couple supervisors on the telephone. If I could get the clerk of the board to do a roll call, please.
Supervisor Angus?
I'm here.
Supervisor Johnson?
Present.
Okay, we do have a quorum. Supervisor Gold is here with us today, and Supervisor Watson. So the first item on the agenda will be a discussion on possible action and an update from the Public Health Director to the Board of Supervisors regarding COVID. So, good afternoon, Denise.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'll start off as I usually do with the numbers. We have had a total of 1,033 cases in our county to date. Of those, we have had 424 people that have recovered, which is about approximately 41%. And we have had 80 deaths in our community, in our county. As you can see, or most people have seen, the numbers in the community are still continuing to go up pretty rapidly and very consistently, and we're going to need the public's help, I think, overall in reducing those case counts in the future. We have identified, I know there's been a lot of interest in knowing about businesses and so forth out in the community that have been affected by COVID, and I know there's particular interest in certain industries, but I did want to make sure that people understood that basically every industry has been impacted to some degree by cases. We've, of course, seen through Facebook and other sources information about restaurants and bars, but I think you can extend that to other government offices, financial institutions, retail businesses, grocery stores, utility companies, beauty salons, social gatherings, religious facilities, hospitals, etc. So it's basically out there, it's widespread, and it's going to take all of us working together to reduce the number of cases and reduce the transmission. Looking at the hospital capacity report, looking at today's report, we look like we're doing pretty well so far. I realize Havasu Regional Medical Center continues to sort of run on a high end as far as their ICU bed use. But as of this morning, they still had 2 ICU beds available. So, and again, these numbers only reflect their normal capacity for ICUs and doesn't include any of their surge beds. Any questions on hospital reports?
Does anyone have any questions? Supervisor Watson.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Ms. Burley, could you tell me anything or information that you may have about patients being transferred from out of the area to Kingman Regional Medical Center?
Actually, Kingman Regional Medical Center and Havasu Regional Medical Center have received transfer patients from other communities that have reached their surge capacity. Oh, sorry.
And how is that affecting our ability to serve our people in Mojave County?
Those hospitals make that decision when they are contacted as to whether or not they can accept that patient into their care. So that's a hospital's decision as to whether or not they can accept that patient and provide that level of care to that person. As far as I know, that hasn't impacted their care.
And how many patients are we talking about?
No, I don't have an exact number. I will try to find that for you, okay?
Thank you. My concern is that a number of these patients are coming up from the lower Arizona-Colorado River area, Yuma, the Colorado River corridor, and how that might have an effect on our citizens here.
Correct. And I know when we were on a phone call last week, Mike Patterson, who's the CEO of Havasu Regional Medical Center, did discuss this and bring it up as a topic. And, you know, his comments were pretty spot on that they're going to accept clients or customer or patients when they can, knowing that if we need that same resource, that we would then reach out to those hospitals and ask for the same concern and, you know, the same reciprocation.
So if our hospitals go to maximum capacity, and theirs are already at maximum capacity, where do we go from there?
Well, if we're beyond our surge capacity, then the state is actually looking at alternative care centers, and they have St. Luke's down in the valley in Phoenix that they're working on. They were also at one point looking at one in Tucson and one in Flagstaff. I don't know where they're at in that stage and if they've actually worked on ramping those up. But they had locations identified where they could bring in the equipment basically on a moment's notice and try to set up. And those would be more of a step-down care, so anybody that needed ICU care would have to still stay in an ICU bed capacity. But as people got better and they required a lower acuity care setting, then they could be transferred to those alternative care sites.
Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Gold?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Denise, we talk about surge capacity. I have a concern whether the hospitals actually have staff to man those surge beds or not.
Right.
You know, having a place to lay the patient is swell, but if you don't have the staff to take care of them, that's problematic.
It is. Understood. They're all required to have these plans in place so that they can move very quickly into an operational mode for these surge beds. I do know that in talking with, again, Mike Patterson with Havasu Regional Medical Center, that they would be looking to request staff from some of their other hospitals as part of their network. And so it may take 2 or 3 days for that to take place. And I'm not sure about the other hospitals, how quickly they could ramp up and have that surge capacity ready to go.
Hopefully they have some hospitals that are in states that aren't seeing an uptick in cases so that they have the available manpower to send out.
Correct. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I also wanted, if you wouldn't mind, to address Supervisor Johnson's question last Thursday about a 90%, and I think he was referring to capacity of the hospitals as far as a trigger point. There's no trigger point that ADHS is aware of around 90%. The trigger point was 80%, and it was associated with the elective surgeries, that when hospitals reach 80% capacity and there's some other criteria in there, then they would need to discontinue their elective surgeries until they got below that level.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Valley View has not reported testing in a month. Do we know why?
We've actually really struggled to get those numbers. Those are all voluntary to us, so we have requested those testing numbers for some time, and I'll follow up on any reasons why, but you know, we have to rely on the hospitals to send those. Those are not mandated for them to report to us. So it is for them to report out, as well as the labs, to ADHS. So ADHS is essentially the better site for testing information. It's more complete.
Thank you. Are we seeing any burnout from our doctors and nurses, and do we have a plan in place if we do?
You know, I do think as this has been progressing that that's been a concern of doctors. And we did recently actually have a doctor from KRMC, an ED doc, approach us about wanting to speak with the board. I believe he will be presenting a letter to each of you and then possibly coming next Monday to actually speak about the concerns, not just on hospital staff, but it also relates to capacity issues and other COVID-related items to try to figure out how we can stop the spread.
All right. I'm hearing we may be running low on PPE supplies again. Do you know if this is true, and if so, are we working to be able to get those supplies?
So we're actively working to always look for supplies. We also have been receiving supplies still from the state, so I have not heard from any of the agencies that were, or facilities that were, they're running short on supplies. If you have a specific agency that you're referring to, Supervisor Johnson, if you could send that to me, that would be very helpful. Will do.
Have our hospitals been requesting Remdesivir drug that we have in stock, and does it work on the majority of patients who receive the drug?
So we have been distributing this to local hospitals. Last week, we received a fairly large shipment, and we sent, how many doses per hospital? We sent 40, is it treatments? Sorry. 40 vials to each hospital before we even hit the weekend to make sure that they would have that on hand. And we still have some in our supply, and we should, I have to look into this, but the agreement initially was that the company, Gilead, that makes that particular medication would send their allotment and what they had available to all the counties in the, not just in our state, but throughout the country. And I believe that supply will diminish by the end of this month. And so I need to follow up. At last phone call, ADHS was unsure if we would receive additional shipments into July. But with that said, the goal was that Gilead would have that medicine available for hospitals to purchase at that point, whereas so far that medicine has been provided to us at no cost.
All right. Does it seem to be working for a majority of our patients?
We've received some information that it has worked for some and not for others.
All right. I think my last question has to do with hospitals is on, in Lake Havasu, they have a COVID-19 task force, which is run by a local doctor, and they're saying they're running out of testing squads in Lake Havasu for the urgent care and the doctor's offices. Do you know if this is true and if we're able to get more supplies?
So I have not been made aware that anyone has been running short of those as well. We do have a process, and we have notified providers that if they need test kits, that those are available and we can provide them to them. The state has been providing them to us, and our role is to distribute them out to those providers and facilities.
Thank you, Director, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
Okay, Supervisor Angus, do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is about wait, I gotta turn this off. My question is about retesting. So I'm getting some comments from people that some companies, if their employees had tested positive and go out before they can come back to work, they have to be retested. As I understand it, that is not something that the county recommends because it's kind of fraught with a lot of problems and false positives and things like that. Is there a procedure, a policy and procedure for this for businesses to follow? Are they being sort of too overly cautious to the point where it might, frankly be hurting them a little as far as staffing?
So we do not recommend that there be mass testing of someone or testing of someone to return to work. One, that if we have limited testing supplies, that's not a good use of that resource. Two, they could be positive or negative one day and then 2 days later be positive, so it's not indicative if they're not symptomatic. And we want to make sure that we're using those resources wisely. And just manpower resources of trying to limit testing to those individuals that are symptomatic or potentially close contacts to those who have symptoms. But ideally, you're really targeting those people who are already exhibiting symptoms, even if they're mild, and that we get those individuals tested. And if positive, isolated, but until they get a result, staying in quarantine.
No, yeah, I'm sorry if I misunderstood you. I'm talking about people who've already been tested positive before they are able to go back to work.
I see. Okay.
To be retested to make sure that they don't still have it. And isn't the problem that if they could feasibly have it in them, although they're not contagious at all? Hello?
Hi, Supervisor Angus. This is Lynn Valentine. And you're
Lynn.
correct. So as Denise had stated, there's issues with the availability of testing, the manpower, but also, yes, there can be occasions where a person is tested past their isolation period, so they've done the isolation period, they're no longer symptomatic, but if they're swabbed again, it still can come back positive, but they may not still be infectious. So there's an issue with that. So a person could continue to test positive for quite some time, even after their symptoms have resolved and they've completed the isolation period.
And you're confident, the Public Health, Arizona Department of Health, CDC, they're confident that that's the case? Because I think that there's kind of a disconnect that businesses in their quest to be thorough and, keep their employees and customers safe are maybe going a little overboard with this.
Right, and that's based on research through the CDC and through Arizona Department of Health Services also back that as well. So we follow those guidelines as well.
Okay, I think that's all I have for today.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Angus. Denise, I have a question. I know I sent you an email from asking questions about this medication called, how do you pronounce that?
Remdesivir.
I'm glad I asked, because I would have not got it right.
I practice every day.
So you told me that the state determines how much you receive, that they have an allocation from the manufacturer and uses a formula to distribute the product out based on population, taking into account the percentages of ICU beds with COVID-19 patients in the county. So who decides who gets them from there? And can you just tell us a little bit more about this medication?
Well, the facility and the providers actually make the decision from that point forward. There is specific criteria, and I don't know if you can speak to any of that. Yeah, would you mind? There is specific criteria that does fit into the use of this particular medication, and Lynn can speak to that.
Okay.
It's really used for critically ill patients, for those who are seriously ill with COVID.
So these would be people in ICU already?
They could be in ICU. Yeah, there's certain criteria. I'm looking at it right now. Depending on their oxygen level, when they're just on room air without any supplemental oxygen, it has to be at a certain level. If their respiratory rate is elevated, obviously if they're intubated, if they're on mechanical ventilation, that's part of the criteria, or it can be if they're using supplemental oxygen. So there's several criteria that should be in place. They're critically ill. They're seriously ill. It's not for mild or moderate cases of COVID. And it's all injection. It's all done through IV. So it's not an oral med. It has to be administered in a clinical setting.
Okay. I think that clears that up very well. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then, Denise, I have one final question. I went to Grand Canyon West last week and attended a Zoom meeting there for tourism. And when we arrived at the parking lot at Grand Canyon West, there was a security person there that took our temperature before they allowed us to go further. And I thought that was interesting, and it was non-invasive. And I'm just wondering if you would suggest or recommend whether or not we do that at our regular board meetings here, since we now are opening back up to the public somewhat.
That is a tool that's been used and is currently in use by some employers to determine whether or not they may have symptoms. And then additionally, a lot of agencies will have screening questions. Do you have any of these symptoms? And if you do, you're expected to turn around and leave. So I do think it can be one piece, but I want to caution you on just using temperature as a guide, because everybody's temperature varies significantly, and one person's level of a temperature is not another's. So I think it's something that should be used with caution, but can be a tool.
Okay. Supervisor Gold?
Denise, what temperature are they looking for, since your skin temperature runs cooler than your core temperature?
The temperature that they've been using is 100.4.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions or comments for Denise? Hearing none, I thank you for your presentation this morning. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us?
We are, just so you know, we are still working on increasing our testing in our county. And we did learn today that Sonora Quest is providing testing in Lake Havasu City, and we'll be following up with all the other Sonora Quest locations to determine if they are also offering the diagnostic testing, not necessarily the antibody testing, but looking at diagnostic testing. And as we find these additional providers that are offering that, we'll try to encourage them to add that information, their information, into the ADHS website, so that those that are going to that place to search can also just type in that zip code and find that information.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Gold, go ahead.
Denise, if they're looking at a skin temperature of 100.4, what would that correlate to a core temperature of?
Well, that would be a core temperature, yes? The 100 point, okay. Okay, core temperature would be slightly higher.
Got a rule of thumb?
I'm asking the nurse.
I know. I got one eye on her and one eye on you.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Feeling eye in it.
The surface temperature would be slightly lower than the core temperature, so probably 1 to 2 degrees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for our director. Since we've seen the spike in cases, and we're seeing a lot of our restaurants being closed, I know we haven't decided to reduce traffic at the county buildings or anything, but getting back to our early voting, do we have procedures in place, like how often we're going to be sanitizing the booths, the voting booths down, and are we prepared to put down social distancing markings on the floor, and what all are we doing to make sure that we have the supplies available for the early voting staff?
Okay. I can speak somewhat to those questions. In terms of some of the equipment, we have provided masks to the elections team to provide to customers and for their own staff. And more, I think, in terms of the numbers that we provided, I think those were primarily for their volunteers that assist with the actual election activities on that day. I'd need to defer to election staff probably to answer the rest of those questions to understand what steps they're going to be taking, and I don't know if they are. There he is.
I can talk to a bit of it, I'll be down.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
I didn't hear that answer.
We have Alan Temperate coming to the podium that's going to provide an answer.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hello, everybody, and Supervisor Johnson. Okay, I can't answer specifically for early voting in a recorder, but I can tell you what I really do know what's going to happen, because it's going to be just like the election poll sites. Okay, we're going to be following guidelines. Whatever the guidelines were at the time. I'm going to say early voting starts next week, and then the election is on August 4th. Whatever guidelines are coming in from the state is what we're going to follow. That's what my plan is, and I'm pretty certain the recorder has the same plan. We were given a couple of weeks back from the state. We were given what they were sending out to the public about how to avoid the situation, apply for an early ballot, this, that, here and there and such, trying to guide people away from polling sites specifically, and then if they do want to show more so to an early voting site. We were given guidelines, I keep saying the word guidelines, to do social distancing, to put tape on the floor, to teach our staff how to do this, and I'm planning on doing that with the poll workers on election day, and I'm pretty certain that that's what the recorder is going to be doing for her staff at the early voting sites. PPE supplies are hitting the door this week from the Secretary of State's office. Hand sanitizers, things that we ordered, face shields, as a matter of fact, are going to be coming in. Face masks. are coming to a certain place and need them. And our health department came through with a whole lot of the face masks for us, and they're going to be for our poll workers and anybody who comes in who wants something to that effect. We plan on going a little bit further on the elections end of it. We're getting things I like to call personal disposable marking devices. When you're checking into a polling place, you're going to be issued your own very nice paper-made blue pen to fill in your oval, so you don't have to touch anybody else's pens. You're going to be given a Q-tip. This is kind of weird, but you're going to be given a Q-tip, and this Q-tip will allow you to sign in on the electronic polling book equipment. It works great instead of picking up and using a stylus. All the poll workers, and I can say I can speak for the recorder, they have rubber gloves going down for their people that are going to be working the poll sites. Now, whether they're going to require their early voting staff to wear face masks, wear rubber gloves or not, I cannot speak for Recorder Blair on anything like that. My end of it at the poll sites, I want to follow the guidelines, and right now the guidelines are they will be there, they'll be supplied, but it's not saying it's mandatory. At this moment, the state is not saying it's mandatory that we do this, okay? So I just want to feel over the next 5 weeks from tomorrow, how things are. And I start poll worker training in a couple of weeks, literally 2 weeks from now. I start heading to the Arizona Strip and so I'm going to give my people as much information as possible and go from that point on. So the state is doing a pretty good job making sure we're all covered, and we went out on our own prior to the state, and I secured hand sanitizer and these other types of things we're talking about. So this has been on our minds for months and months and months because it became an issue for the presidential preference election on March 17th. Not quite as much, but it was right there as well. So Supervisor Johnson, I hope that answers your question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Temper.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Tempert? Supervisor Gold?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, Alan, not only are we getting a souvenir pen, we're getting a souvenir Q-tip?
You are, and you can put your Q-tip in the trash can on the way out. You can put your pen in a bin on the way out if you want. We'll sanitize them down for the next time around. Or you can take it home and remember the experience.
Jackpot.
Jackpot.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
You asked and he answered.
Yes. I didn't have anything more to add today.
Okay, last chance for any further questions of Denise Burley. Seeing none, thank you, Denise, and we'll go on to the most important item on the agenda today. Item number 2, this will be a discussion of possible action regarding the recognition of Mike Hendricks, retiring Mojave County Manager. I don't think we need to take any action, but we certainly need some discussion here. So as many of you know, the time has finally arrived for us to recognize Mike Hendricks for his outstanding service and leadership in anticipation of his retirement tomorrow. As many of you know, and a few here in the audience actually remember, Mike began with the county back in 1984, 2 years before I did, in fact. He began as an engineer technician, and he's now served the public for 36 years, with the last 7.5 years leading this organization as either the county administrator or county manager, while also serving as our county engineer since October of 2002. And now, because Mike is always telling jokes, some of them pretty funny and some of them not so much, Kat put together a list of some of the jokes that you've told over the year, Mike, and I'm not going to read all of these because the public is watching this, but I thought I would recognize at least one and then give you the list in case after you retire you need to remember something funny. So the one I'll read to you. I stayed up all night to see where the sun went. Then it dawned on me. And it dawned on me that I think it's appropriate to start off here with a bit of a roast for Mr. Hendricks, so here goes. So I've been told that age is nothing but a number, but in the case of Mike Hendricks, it's a rather large number. I have a little label for you here that says old timer. Mike's service to Mojave County can be traced back for decades. Fortunately for him, most of the witnesses are no longer available. Another one that says, been there, done that. I'm going to send these home with you, Mike. Now, I know a lot of people have different opinions about Mr. Hendricks. He is stubborn until he's amenable. He is always right until he's wrong. Here's another one. The answer is no. It's his way or the highway. He's going to be on the highway soon in his motorhome. He's a taskmaker until you realize it was a teaching moment. He's a micromanager until you get it right. Isn't that right, Mr. Roper? It's not a good idea unless it's his idea. Sometimes he's arrogant until you see a softer side. And yes, it does exist. Whatever sentiments that anyone holds, well, they simply don't matter after tomorrow, because Mike's going to be somebody. He's going to be a civilian. He's going to be enjoying his retirement. So, now that we've had a little fun at Mike's expense, I'd like to give each of the board members an opportunity to make a parting statement or roast Mr. Hendricks, whichever you prefer, beginning with our most senior board member, Supervisor Buster Johnson. Do you have anything that you'd like to say?
Madam Chair, I believe he lost his connection.
That's quite a statement. Supervisor Watson, you'll be the next senior member on the board. Would you like to have any parting comments for Mr. Hendricks?
Well, thank you for recognizing my seniority.
You're welcome.
But there are a number of people in the audience, and I'd like to hear a couple of comments from them. So I'll pass. If you'd like to ask one of our other board members, I'd like to ask some of our cohorts that are in the audience if they want to make a comment or two. I see a couple people out there that might be ready to make a comment or two.
I think that's excellent, and we'll go through the board members, and then we'll definitely do that, because I think that'll be fun and interesting too. So next on the list of seniority would be Supervisor Angus.
Okay, well, I do have a little bit of a presentation, but I was planning on doing that after the main presentation. So I know that there are people that want to talk. Maybe you can circle back to me.
Okay, I'm having difficulty hearing you again. Are you saying that you want me to circle around and then come back to you?
Yes, after the main presentation.
Okay, we'll see if we can
Okay, thank you.
figure out how to make that happen. And then Supervisor Gold, our junior member here.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's interesting to hear politicians not want to speak. I don't know if this is some alternative universe where it only happens on the retirement of the county manager. But Mike, I just want to thank you for your years of service to the county. I haven't been around long enough to develop, we've developed a little bit of rapport, but probably not as much as the rest of the members. But I just want to thank you. Enjoy your goat and enjoy your retirement. God bless you.
Okay, Cora Lloyd, I'd like to call you up and have you share a moment with us. I always like to call people up when they're not expecting.
Good afternoon. So at this time, then I will just take a moment to thank Mike Hendricks for hiring me. One of the best days of my life. I appreciate it so much. I have learned a tremendous amount under Mike's leadership, and I have thoroughly enjoyed the time here with Mojave County under his guidance. The jokes are never ending. I hope that he truly finds the chocolate on the road to retirement. Mike's Mojave County family all came together and donated to a little bit of fun for Mike and probably Sherry. So with that, I leave Mike with these few comments that things with the number 1,000 in common. The miles of shoreline in Mojave County, the distance from Kingman to Bassboro in Oklahoma City, a picture, because it's worth 1,000 words. 2 to the third power times 5 to the third power is 1,000. And a grand is equal to 1,000. And these gift cards for Mike are 1,000. These are from your fellow county family, and we want to thank you for your tremendous and excellent service for 36 years. We hope that these cards come in handy for gas and food, hunting, fishing, or whatever makes you happy on your first retirement road trip. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you very much, Coral, and let that be a testament of the fact that Mojave County employees have appreciated Mike's leadership over the years. So thank you very much, Mike, and I hope you make it to the Bass Pro Shop in Oklahoma City and spend some of those gift cards. At this time, I'd like to have Tim Walsh come forward. I think he has some parting words of wisdom for County Manager Mike.
Coral said the best day of her life was when Mike hired her. I think Mike's best decision as county manager was to hire me, right? It definitely was a great day in my life as well. It's been an honor and a privilege to work with Mike and to be mentored and taught by him. I know one of his rules for life is never miss an opportunity to teach, and definitely I've had many of those opportunities, both good and bad, right? I've given him plenty of opportunities to teach me, I'll put it that way. Mike, we went around and Kat did a stellar job. We reached out to all of the departments in the county and had everybody share some pictures, share some parting words, and we've been able to put those together in this book here, and want to present that to you and as a memoriam, and going back to Mike's sense of humor. When Kat first had this put together, she had Mike Hendricks, 1984 to 2020. She said that looked way too much like a tombstone, so she had to mix it up a little bit to give us a little bit more happiness on this day for him. But I'd like to present this to you, and again, thank you for everything you've done for each one of us, and thank you for all that you've done for the county.
All right, I look forward to getting a glance at that book later, Mike. So on a more serious note, I'd like to take this opportunity to present Mike with his retirement plaque, which states, in recognition of your dedicated service to Mojave County, Michael P. Hendricks, 1984, 2020. There you go, Mike. If you want to come forward and accept this plaque, I think we'd all like to join you for a photograph.
Madam Chair?
Yes. We can hear you, Supervisor Angus.
Oh, okay. Before you guys go up there and take your picture, can I give my little going away parting gift?
Madam Clerk, we're here already with the photograph.
So-
We'll do it afterwards.
Supervisor Angus, they're already up there, but
Okay.
yours is on deck.
Can they? Okay. Okay, mine's on deck. All right.
Do I finally get to shake your It's beautiful. Thank you very much. And this is the appropriate time for you to cry, so, go ahead and show us your soft side, because I told you to have.
On TV, yeah.
Congratulations, Sherry.
Yes.
Supervisor Angus, go ahead.
Okay, is Karen there?
Yes, ma'am.
Karen, can you go up there with Mike?
Yeah.
So, Mike, you know I would have been there if I could. We've spoken. You know how I feel about you leaving. But I wish you and Sherry much happiness as you start your next adventure. So I wanted to get you something that might mean something. I even asked Sherry to help me out, but you're a difficult man to buy for. So I had an idea, and I called Stephen Latowski, and of course he sprung into action like he always does, and he and his wonderful staff came together to make this for you. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it reminds you of us as you drive down the happy road of retirement.
Is it a puppy?
No, I said he'd be happy.
Awesome.
That's absolutely perfect, Supervisor Angus. Thank you so much.
Oh, I hope you put it on your motorhome and think of us every time you drive away.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm not able to speak, but I hope each and every one of you knows how much I love this organization. It's both the most difficult time in my life and the best. The most difficult because I'm going to be leaving such wonderful people. Supervisors, I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate all you've done for me. I appreciate allowing me to work for you and for this county. We've got exceptional people, and I believe we've chosen an exceptional leader to take my place, Sam Altiers. The directors that I'm leaving Sam are wonderful. They've made my job the easiest job in the world, and you're going to see that, Sam. They're also exceptional individuals. The supervisors you'll enjoy working with, Supervisor Gould with his knowledge and dedication to the Constitution, Supervisor Angus with their passion, you'll enjoy that. Supervisor Johnson with his consistency, Chairman Bishop with her feistiness, and she's a fighter and she's a participant, and she certainly is up to any challenge that confronts her. And lastly, Supervisor Watson, he's a true consummate gentleman, and unfortunately you'll only have the pleasure of working with him for a half a year, but you've also got my incredibly talented and wonderful directors that you'll be working with, and these outstanding employees that we have here in Mojave County. And I'm sure you're no stranger to excellence, but you're going to see a higher level of excellence working with this organization. And I want to turn and thank all my directors. It's been my pleasure, my sincere pleasure, working with all of you from the bottom of my heart. And I just thank you and all the employees of Mojave County. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Watson?
Mike, if I could get you to come back up, you and Sherry to come back up for just a minute. So the cameras can see you well. But I would like to say thank you personally and as an elected official for doing such a fine job for so many years. You built an organization that's going to last a great deal longer, and that's part of your legacy. A legacy that you can be very proud of. Each one of your directors, each one of their teams look up to you and have for quite some time. Your legacy will live on for a great number of years. But that's only one portion. You have two portions of your legacy. You and I have been working on water issues for many years now. And I think the legacy that will be recognized by Mike Hendricks as county manager as one of the very few county managers in the state of Arizona that recognize the importance of water issues on a county level. And with that legacy, I think you should be very proud that Mojave County is well represented throughout the state and recognized throughout the state on our efforts for water issues for our citizens of Mojave County. And for that, I would like to thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you. I can't think of a finer gentleman to work with, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to give anyone here in the audience the opportunity, if they want to come forward and say a few parting words to Mike Hendricks. You certainly have the opportunity now. If not, we'll join everybody upstairs in the mezzanine for a little celebration for Mike and Sherry Hendricks.
By the way, Mike can't fire you if you want to come up and...
Okay, well, with that being said then, and no one coming forward, I think I'll adjourn this meeting, and I just want to let Mike know that he'll be dearly missed, and we wish him all the best in his future adventures. Godspeed, Mike, and we'll see you upstairs. Meeting adjourned.